O Lord, O Father, we are your children, and we are constantly receiving your blessing and in search of your blessing, O Lord. Lord, we've come because we have questions of our own about racial reconciliation, about the use of resources, about our brothers and sisters whom we may not even know. And so, Lord, in this time, in this place, help us to find a way forward as a people, as a presbytery, as Oregonians or Washingtonians who have gone through this year seeing that things are not as they should be and trying to find the church's place in that. We pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
So, brief introduction. I'm Sarah Lewis. I introduced a motion last night, which was in 3 parts to make it really tricky and can of wormy, and so for which I apologize. The first part was that we forgive the debt of Genesis Fellowship Community Church, and to my knowledge, that debt right now is $2,000 or less. Well, so because I don't know the whole story, and I want to admit that, and part of the reason my motion was shaped the way it was is because I know I don't know the whole story. So I was just taking kind of what I was surmising. But sitting on the Board of Trustees, my understanding is there is still some outstanding debt with Genesis, and I do believe it is a small one. Tam there is backing me up, like 2,000, does that sound ballpark right? Okay.
Between 2,000 and 8,000, I think it was about 8,000 when they paid off the rest of the stuff, and that was lingering.
Okay,
So
and
they've been paying down on it.
they've been paying down, so in my mind, there's something still there, and every time we have a Board of Trustees meeting, we make a comment on who's paid off loans and everything else like that. And part of me is like, where are we taking these people's money at this point? I don't know, because I have some justice issues that for an African American congregation, and who they're serving, and who we as a presbytery are serving. So anyway, so that was the first part of my motion. The second part of my motion was that the presbytery encourage all of our congregations within the presbytery to seek partnership ministries with congregations of a different racial, ethnic identity, and I put organization too, because I think this is sort of where the local option may be the smartest option. In Piedmont's case, we've been talking to an African-American house church, and we have been blessed every time we have a conversation with them, and so we are trying to figure out the way we are moving forward in partnership, and it's going to be very specific to us and to the Promised Land Community Church that we're talking to. Tam was sharing with me how there's a church, or there was a Korean house church housed in the church that he was in, and how he felt, well, maybe we could have done more partnership, or maybe there's a partnership yet to happen with that Korean congregation. So it's like, I guess that's why I went with the local option. Honestly, my first one would have been, let's just give I believe we sold the building for about $550,000 now. I looked on Portland Maps, and that's what the contract sale said. So I'm like, honestly, I would just give that money back to Genesis, but that might open a whole nother can of worms, and I didn't think that was politically whatever. So that's why I didn't go in that direction with the money. But it was to encourage our congregations to engage in those partnerships. And the reason I would like to encourage us to do that is I have this terrible vision where the Presbytery of Cascades is always predominantly white, and about as white as we are right now. And when I say that, I recognize there are a few members of color. There are some congregations who are predominantly would not identify as white, but I don't see how, unless we do something differently, we're going to be anything but mostly a segregated church and mostly segregated congregations without really meaningful participation from minorities. And so I'm like, well, maybe, and part of the problem is like, honestly, I'm not sure if I was an African American in Portland, I would want to go worship at a white church. It's like, I got to put up with those guys like 7 days a week, and it's like almost everybody, And so that was my thinking on that, is that maybe it's not a matter of us being open and welcoming to whoever comes in our doors, maybe it's intentionally seeking out partnerships with people born like us. And what I hear from all the congregations that are engaged in that work already is there's a tremendous blessing there. So I want us all to have it. So the final one was, we're Presbyterians, and to us it doesn't mean much unless there's a dollar sign attached to it. And that's why I threw out the $200,000, was I knew when Genesis paid off their loan, I didn't know the money was already designated, but when they paid off their loan, that there was a big chunk of change there that they paid to us. And that was just kind of guesstimate. It was also kind of what I thought we wouldn't miss too badly. Because I'm on the board of trustees, I'm like, well, I don't want us to administer it. We got us into the mess, so let somebody else administer that. And I picked CORE, which wasn't very nice of me in the sense that I didn't consult with CORE, so forgive me. But the reason I did that was because I think what went into the Genesis situation was a case of the usual suspects, which is that there are a lot of us which take up leadership roles in the Presbytery, and we try to figure out as well as we can the things that we can, and we put a lot of effort into it, and it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of stress, and it's a lot of tension, and I think this decision was like that. And so I think we need to have a different group of people administering the funds. That was really long, I'm so sorry, but that was kind of some of the background of what I introduced. And actually, why don't you tell me why you're here? What questions do you have? Just introduce yourself, and if you have a question, you can ask it, we'll write it down, and if there's something you want to get out of this, let me know. Go ahead, Craig.
Okay. I'm Greg Ikehara Martin, pastor of the former Laurelhurst Presbyterian Church, a Pun congregation, therefore a partner with Sarah and Piedmont. And I'm just interested to see where the conversation will go next.
Okay.
I too have made a clumsy stab in this sort of direction, and so I want to hang with others who want to try.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, I am going to reveal my ignorance, but I need to have more of the backstory of the Genesis Fellowship and, you know, what has transpired to get us to this point
Okay.
in our relationship
Mm-hmm.
with them. I mean, the Presbytery's relationship with them.
So I'm going to give you what I know. Tam may know more than me, and if anyone has correcting information, please jump in, because I'm going to say I don't have the whole picture. I tell this is my perspective as being a pastor in a neighboring congregation. When I came into the church, there was, at Piedmont, there was about 1.5 miles from us, Vernon Presbyterian Church, which was a predominantly white congregation. It was a very small congregation, and it was a congregation that was engaged in active ministry with the Lutheran church down the street. And they had also welcomed into their building Genesis Fellowship. So you have the Vernon building. I'm just gonna, I've got this in a graphic in my head, so excuse me if so this is the Vernon building, which was housing Genesis, okay? Now, Vernon, for whatever reason, related a lot better to the Lutherans than they related to Genesis, as far as I can tell. I don't know the whole story, okay, and I'm not the person to tell their story. But their vision was the Lutherans were really involved in ministry over on Alberta, which was kind of like this new and hip and happening street, and now none of us locals recognize it, right? And so Vernon's vision, as far as I could tell, but those on the administrative committee could probably tell it a lot better, I think was that they were going to go over to the Lutheran church and join in the ministry that was going on there, and Genesis was going to become the keeper of the building. I could be wrong. Now, in the meantime, for various reasons, Vernon was kind of going through an institutional meltdown. I mean, it's really hard to be Presbyterian when you're a really small congregation. Maybe you start cutting corners, maybe you find you just can't satisfy those things that are in the Book of Order. I'm not quite sure what happened. But basically before, and of course it involves transfer of property, so it's not like Vernon could just hand the building over, even if they wanted to, but at some point the Presbytery got involved. And so I, by the way, drive by Genesis every single day, and every single day I thank God that they are there, and every single day I feel so guilty. So that's just, okay, so here we have the Presbytery. And the Presbytery, so no longer the Lutherans, but the Presbytery owns the Vernon building. And for whatever reason, whatever the process, they decide rather than give the building to Genesis and recognize the ministry that they're doing there, even though it's not Presbyterian ministry, is a ministry that is unique to something that our presbytery can't do, we decide we're going to do something really neat. We're going to sell them the building. We sell them, as far as I know from Portland Maps, and I could be wrong, we sell the building to them for $550,000. And this includes a parking lot next door to the building. And there was supposed to be a balloon payment, so little money down, and at some point, 10 years, the balloon payment kind of thing. And it was in 2008 that sale happens. Now, before that, we'd been talking with Genesis, did they want to become Presbyterian? And they're like, nah, I don't think we really want to do that, kind of thing. So there was a whole bunch of discussion that was going on before, again, that I wasn't privy to. Here's the thing about who Genesis was serving. They were serving predominantly, it was a white and black, I believe, Baptist congregation that decided they were going to be an integrated church. They integrated, and the white people decided they didn't like how things were going, and most of them left. And so things had not gone the way the congregation had expected, though a few people stayed, and they still had that vision of multicultural ministry. So the people that they were serving, as far as I can tell, being a local pastor, were predominantly African American, also Hispanic, also white, and it is, I believe, still a very diverse church. Now, serving African American children in Multnomah County, the poverty level of African American children in Multnomah County right now is 52% poverty for African American children in our community. It's like 38% from Spanish-speaking households. It's like 15, 19. It's not great if you're white, but it's a lot better. So when they're serving African American children in our community, that is a ministry the Presbytery is not doing in any meaningful way that I know. And yet it is one of the most impoverished, vulnerable populations in our state. And I know that throughout Oregon, there are rural populations that are in poverty. I was checking the numbers this morning to make sure I was right about this. But the highest amounts of poverty are for African American children and Native American children. And you can look across every county, and in almost every single county, the poverty level of the minority groups is twice what it is for the white group. Okay, so if I look around and see that our church is all white, I'm going to say statistically, we are probably a whole lot better off than an African American congregation. At the same time that we sold the building in 2008, you remember that economic downturn? Our unemployment got really tough. It was like 10 to 15%. It was like over 30% for the African American congregation. So you have a huge, huge burden for every African American congregation, because your unemployment level hasn't been what it was for the white folks, okay, but it's been much higher, right? And so now it's really, really high. At the same time that the unemployment's really high, this congregation is serving 97211, same zip code as my church is in. This is the highest, this time was the highest level of incarceration anywhere in the state. And if you know anything about Oregon's incarceration, it really falls heavily on our black brothers and sisters and our Native American brothers and sisters. I mean, we even fine them twice as much, and we don't really give that money back, and that was something that came out this year. So I'm looking at this group of people that Genesis is serving, and I'm thinking, why do we need this $550,000? Because we are not serving this population. We try to serve them, but for whatever reason, I don't see us doing a really good job of that, because I don't see us having an African American congregation. But, it was probably a pretty good deal market-wise. Not bad. We decided to take that money, and I'm sure I'm not getting the nuances of this, but we put it towards new church development. Not a bad thing. We put it in our endowment fund, and I don't know what the splits were here. Not a bad thing. And we put it in the Barnabas fund. An excellent thing, right? Now this is what I see in this picture. So if our church is predominantly white, and none of our activities are making us less white, and only a small portion of our activities are engaging us with populations like the one that Genesis is serving, what's happening to our resources? We're kind of like, all of these things are going back in one way or another to our congregation of Presbyterian ministry. Ideally, the new church developments would be racial ethnic, but I'm going to say we don't have a good track record on that one. So that's the backstory of where I'm coming from. Honestly, the 200,000 and let's everybody partner up was like my political solution. I'm like that 550,000, give it back to Genesis. If you can't stomach giving it back to Genesis, spread it out over the county to African American congregations. The only congregation in our presbytery that is serving a similar population is Warm Springs. Give the money to Warm Springs, but don't take it and put it in this pot and recycle it and feel like we're poor, when in the meantime we have moved that money from this community into our own community. And there was a reason why we owned Vernon in the first place, and there was a reason why we were able to buy it, and there was a reason why we weren't redlined and we were able to get loans. And in this whole, if we're gonna have conversations about racial, ethnic relationships, we need to be really real about what we are doing as a presbytery. Maybe this was an okay deal. Maybe it's just fine. But for me, driving past that building every single day and thinking about who that congregation is serving and who I'm failing to serve, I've really got to wonder and ask that question. That was a big, long answer. I'm so sorry, you guys. I didn't mean to talk this much.
I think it was
No, it
important. No.
really needed that.
As you've admitted, it is an incomplete telling of that
It
story.
is a completely,
And-
it's a completely incomplete telling of the story. It is the best take on the story that I have. And I'm gonna say there's probably a lot of can of worms. I do know that this whole thing was really painful for the trustees, the ones working on the deal.
Right.
I'm feeling like I'm probably taking something where they're like, hey, we came away with a great blessing, and I'm like, oh no, we totally missed the blessing. And so I guess what I was thinking of when I was thinking of the motion, I'm like, I feel like we did miss a blessing back here, and we can't necessarily undo that. But what I'm wondering is what blessing can we grab going forward? Can we look at this sale and what we're doing with the money in a different way, and maybe try to share a vision of what Genesis was doing of being a multicultural church, or bringing us into contact with somebody who, and supporting the contact. I mean, we've got so many congregations actually that I think are in one way or another are already kind of trying to engage in this partnership, and I want us to encourage that.
Genesis is still a congregation.
Oh, they're very much a
Yes.
congregation. Yes.
And so they're, you know, yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure that they're still in place and
They're
they're
still
still
in place.
moving forward.
To pay this, they sold their parking lot. I am an urban church without a parking lot. Maybe they planned to sell their parking lot in the first place. But part of me went, did we just hobble them? I'm not sure. So, and that was part of like the, when Genesis sold in 2008, I was having my first baby. I honestly didn't pay any attention until I got put on the board of trustees, and I was like, what do you mean we're still taking money from Genesis? And then I started thinking about this, and I thought, I didn't say anything. I've been thinking this in one sense or another for 8 years off and on, and just ignoring it, and so it's like, I don't know if we can't go back for that blessing, but I want some blessings going forward that take us to a new place as a presbytery. Other questions, comments?
So does there need to be more of the whole story since this is part of it, or does that matter?
I don't think it matters. I was trying to get you how the
Right.
debt remained, and I was searching for the
So I
thing.
think
doing the
what
same
happened,
thing.
so
But-
this is a theory, because taxes kept on coming up.
Yes.
This is a theory, is Multnomah County is aggressively pursuing any opportunity to extract property taxes from a nonprofit organization that doesn't fill out their paperwork correctly or is engaged in perhaps a nonprofit activity or something like that. I know because we got a letter from them as a congregation. Unfortunately, we had our bylaws that we could mail off. But when I look at the Portland maps, which has some tax information, 2009, there was an assessment of tax, but it doesn't have a dollar amount owed. But I think what happened is either for the maintenance of the building or perhaps for the tax of the building, there was another side loan or financing going.
Yeah.
My guess is that we, the trustees, really thought they were doing them a solid for not charging any interest. And hey, look, we're giving away what ultimately today would have been $1 million property. Except when we gave away when we sold it in 2008, that was not $1 million property. It was much lower, you know. So I'm just guessing that's the little piece that's still owed, because Cheryl assured me that the loans were paid off, but we keep on coming up with, they just owe that much more. So that's a guess.
It's, so I don't know the exact dollar amounts, but I know some of the history. I came to this party a little bit late in terms of actually working with the trustees. I do know that the property was sold for less than the fair market value to them.
Yeah.
I don't know how much less. I also know that, yes, they did sell a parcel of the property, the parking lot, to pay off the loan. And I know that when the trustees made the original sale, it was at either no interest, I think, for a certain amount of time.
5 years, if I recall.
Right. So they had several years of no interest, and then it was a step up to try and encourage them to secure other, because
And then
we
had
didn't
a
want to be in the
balloon that was
banking.
to secure, the balloon
Right.
is when
Yeah.
this all was.
Right, and the other loan was for property taxes, because I believe that the proper paperwork wasn't filed. You're absolutely right that
Yeah.
the county is looking to get any money they can, and so they did not file the appropriate paperwork in time, and so there were property taxes charged, and they didn't have the money to pay for it, so, and it ended up coming back on us, and so at no interest, I think the loan
Yeah.
was made to them for that. And
Right.
so that's kind of how we got to where we are today. And
Yeah.
when they sold the property, they paid off the mortgage, quote unquote, because they were not able to secure financing in another way from a commercial lender.
Yeah, because it's really hard to get
And
those loans.
we explored other options. I mean, I just
Yeah.
do want to say other options were explored, and including maybe possibly the Synod or whatever. But that's what they ended up. That was their decision to go that route, and then to sell the portion of property. But they did not pay off as part of the proceeds the rest of that. And it is a very small amount that's remaining on the interest-free loan for property taxes. So I don't know if that's a more complete picture. I'm sorry, I don't know the figures.
I mean, that's kind of what I
was-
surmised, that it was something like that.
Yeah.
That was kind of how we ended up in terms of the numbers that I now
Yeah.
see in 2016 and
Yeah.
2017.
But I think the question over here is more to the point.
Right.
You're proposing a big policy change in direction for Presbytery, and that's the big picture. How we came by this particular asset of cash is the backstory. It's got little details, but that's not as important as what we're looking at for
Yeah.
big direction.
I guess I felt like it definitely comes from that personal place for me, but at the end of the day, that's exactly it. The other reason why I want to work on this now is because as we have more properties coming up for sale and we're thinking about what we do with those, it's like, I don't want to keep on defaulting to situations where we are selling properties in distressed communities and then bringing the money into Presbytery. We feel like we're really in danger of that story of, the servant with the talents and the one who has the one and thinks he's so poor and he goes and buries it and he doesn't do anything with it. When I was in seminary, I remember Trenton Presbyterian, or the First Presbyterian Church of Trenton had 4 members. And as I was telling Don, a building that seats like 1,000, a sanctuary were four that seated 1,000, and they had an endowment to go for 100 years. I'm like, I don't really care if we have 5 million in assets if we don't have anybody but a handful of us Presbyterians busy being Presbyterians. You know, I'm looking at my congregation right now. I don't want to raise my kids in a church that is completely white. Their school is so diverse. Like, what kind of message am I giving them if I can't give them voices and experiences of the Christian experience in other colors? You know, that's part of my energy behind this, is both from the justice aspect and from the hope for a different future for us.
Point of order. Could we continue your suggestion from several minutes ago to go around the room and
Yes,
intro
go ahead.
people and say what else we're bringing to the table?
And I was gonna have
I like
everyone
that idea.
put down their email address if they wanted to kind of continue the conversation for working with the PLC, or whatever you guys are. You guys.
In case there would be a task group.
Yeah. Whoever the task force is, but if you want to be on the task force or you want to be included in the conversation. So, Greg, are you done in?
I'm done introducing
Okay, so
myself.
you can
That's all
sign
I have
in.
to say.
Sarah, go ahead.
Sarah Sanderson Dowdy, new teaching elder at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Portland. And I'm here because I believe very strongly that the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ makes a difference in human lives and human relationships. And if our church doesn't witness to the difference that makes, we have got some work to do. And I think that all Presbyterian congregations everywhere have a lot of work to do on understanding white privilege and cultivating genuine relationships across difference and living with our resources responsibly. And so I didn't know any of the backstory, but I was very intrigued by this item of new business and be very glad to be in the continuing conversations.
My name is Luann Yockey, and I'm an elder at Lake Grove Presbyterian, and I had a very long career. I'm retired now, but I was in an international ministries that was all about cross-cultural things. So I think, and having grown up in Portland and knowing the Great Divide and how many efforts have been made for so many years, you know, to cross some of the cultural barriers, we mustn't stop trying. But there needs to be some fresh ways to look at that, in my opinion, and to be creating, I love the word partnership. I have spent a lot of time on trying to help partnerships, but I think what my question is here, the bottom line question for me is, what are the partnerships that are possible? When you talk about partnership, I'm not sure it means the same as it means to me. When I talk about partnerships, I'm talking about mutually committed, not a partnership that we create that's one-sided because we want to be your partner. But what is a true partnership? And those things are beautiful when they're mutual.
And could you introduce camera person? Could you introduce yourself too?
I'm Dawn Shampoo, and I'm
All right.
one of the interim co-execs here in Cascades for now. And I have been staff to the trustees, but so I was really interested to come to hear what you all have to say.
Marilyn Allen, retired pastor from St. Helens, Oregon. I'm just curious to know what that was all about. I voted in favor of the motion, but
Against the motion.
Against the motion, in favor of the position of let's deal with it at this Presbyterian meeting. But I really didn't know enough about what it was about. And it's now that I do a little bit better, it seems to me like it is. I'm glad I voted the way I did. I wish we could have discussed it at this meeting.
I'm Don Taylor. I retired from pastorate in Newport about 1.5 years ago, and since then I've been way out of touch. I just got back in town a week ago. I've known Sarah since I was on the preparation for ministry committee. Sorry to embarrass you. And I thought then and still think she's one of the bright lights in our presbytery, and so I trust her in my gut. But I did have a question that highlights is when I was listening to the treasurer's report, if I understood him correctly, he said that we really didn't have a plan for what was gonna happen if the properties were sold. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's scary.
Well, I
That's
think,
correct.
I
That's
think
scary.
it's that we don't have a plan necessarily for even if we're gonna sell the properties at this point, but how they can best be used to further the mission and ministry of the PCUSA and the Presbytery of the Cascades, which
Okay.
is the responsibility of the Presbyterian trustees.
Let me just quick in with a quick story. When I was in the Denver Presbytery, we got a windfall from the sale of Presbyterian Hospital, $5 million. It was probably one of the worst things that ever happened to the Presbytery because nobody knew what to do with it, and they started fighting. It was terrible. So we really need to come up with some type of, and I'm with Sarah, why not make it a mission and just give Genesis as a mission with no strings attached?
I'm all for that.
Because it's already out of the gate.
Oh,
The deal
okay.
has been done.
Okay.
Okay, so the question now is, what do you do with the assets?
Okay.
I'm Janet Cruz, and I'm an elder at Southminster Church in Beaverton.
Mhm.
Not sure I bring anything to the table other than interest in learning about what the issue is, because it was a little confusing to me when you made
Right,
the presentation. So
And
I have
so,
a passion for what you're talking
Yeah.
about, and encourage you to go forward.
Southminster's partnership with the Muslim community was actually one of the reasons I thought, well, maybe this is about the partnerships, is because I feel like the congregations that have either crossed a religious barrier or have crossed a racial ethnic barrier, that it's like they gain so much self-understanding about things, and it's like the blessing just comes back a lot. So that's why I thought of Southminster, is I was like, well, let's celebrate that and support that.
I'm Tam Moore, I'm an elder from Medford, and I'm on the Board of Trustees. And I've known Sarah since she came to this presbytery. We served together a relational support commission when that was something or other. And I don't like to have unstaffed proposals that may or may not work. I want them to be thought out before a body gets a hold of them. And so I said, Sarah, I will help you. We make this thing something that people can handle and work on. And we would have needed to do that had it come to Presbytery floor. And I voted to bring it to the floor so we could say those kind of things. I don't think the referral to PLC is the place where it needs to get its work. It's got to get some work though.
I'm Mary Jo Emmett from John Knox Kaiser, an elder there, and I came because I needed to learn more. And also the fact that there was 3 parts of it, which said there's something more to what's going on here, and so it's really something that should be unpackaged and where it happens and what form it comes to, but more people need to understand. I have a question. It seems to me in some transfers of property or sale of properties, as one church is closed and the building basically went to another congregation, whether it was, and I'm almost thinking it was, they're not Presbyterian. It seems to me that it was a token amount of very and so I'd like to learn a little bit more about what transfers of property has, what form they have taken and at what amounts. Do we really need to have that kind of money?
I can think of one other, and it was from a congregation that was leaving our denomination and I think joining another Presbyterian denomination. And part of the reason it was token was it was in a rural area, that the property was simply unbelievable to our Portland minds, was really not worth as much kind of thing. And it may have had to do with the fact that most of that congregation was staying with it. I don't know the whole story. I do know that a couple of us who have known a little piece of the story have looked at this situation and felt that at some level, race and culture associated with race just played into this a huge amount, you know, and since we weren't the people at the table, we don't know. We're gonna say it probably would have been true for us too.
I think it might be not just a racial thing, even though that might be an
Yeah.
undergirding, but it could be PCUSA versus non-PCUSA.
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
Well,
absolutely.
yeah, Mary Jo, if I can, sir. We have done several different models as churches, congregations have dissolved or congregations have left the denomination, some within property and other things. And the point that was made over here, Don described it as scary, is that we haven't had a strategy that we can engage in. And I think we've got to realize when we form a strategy that it's still going to be a case-by-case basis relating to Christ's witness in the community that was being served, and determining whether that's a role that Presbytery wants to step in or whether it simply wants to treat it as an asset. We also know that buildings are expensive, and you just heard testimony last night about one of the causes for St. Mark's, a very upper-class location and all of the rest of that stuff, that as the congregation shrunk, the resources facing them for a building built in 1947 through 1950 was something that was weighing on their mind and their ability to do their ministry. So they've got to be capable. And we can't say, here's the policy on how Presbytery has changed the thing, because what happened in churches leaving the denomination culminated in putting a hiatus on handling any of those things until we got the gracious and just dismissal policy in place, which was last year. This time last year, we had it in place, and we started then working on the training of the fact finders and whatnot who would help that process along.
The other thing I think that I would just say in terms of, Tam's right, I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, looking at each of these properties, not necessarily the buildings, but their locations in the communities, and what the needs of those are going forward. And the gracious and just the dismissals were a distraction, if you will, that took up a lot of time and, you know, rethinking that. And at this point, I think they're also a little reluctant to have anything set in stone or to really take a serious look at it, because this is more of a long-term thing. It's not what we're going to do with it tomorrow, but holding on to things for now and leaving the things that are in place, like they were talking about the ministries at Hanai or at St. Mark, until the transition is more complete, because to do it before the Presbytery for Vision and Mission is on board, and we know what that's going to look like. Hopefully those are things that the Presbytery will look at in, I would hope, a larger context than a small group of people, but people who are interested, which is why we suggested this open space. Sorry.
John,
Yeah, because we only
John,
have
go
about
ahead.
5
I'm
minutes.
not in a hurry.
We've got 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, two things. The short answer is I'm here because my wife told me I should be here. And I wasn't here last night, but she was.
Right, yeah.
So she understands some of what went on and I don't. The other.
You're her proxy.
Sort of. Anyway, so when I signed in, I put her email address on. I was on the redevelopment task force, whatever it was, for Piedmont Church before Sarah got there. And I was a friend of John Rogers, who was the pastor at Vernon, and the whole process of the closure of Vernon was a complete disaster. And a very emotionally fraught, messy thing. And this is part of the aftermath and the fallout from that. So, and to the best of my knowledge, one piece of what happened was that most of the, or at least a large part of the Vernon congregation basically joined Redeemer Lutheran.
Right, and
they
that
are-
was the plan.
And they are now Lutherans.
Right.
Rather than
Yeah.
Presbyterians. But anyway, my whole life I've been involved
Right.
with cross-cultural work
Mhm.
in one dimension of my life or another, so I'm very connected.
Yeah,
with
and I
those
will say
issues
also,
already.
so David Hutchinson, who's not in this room right now, but probably knows more of this history than most of us here, Westminster continued to be involved to some degree or another with Genesis for a number of years, and I don't know the status of that relationship right now. It's not like things just stopped, it's just that I felt like, you know, as John said, it was messy, we missed a blessing, and we're in danger of missing a whole lot more as time goes on when we think about what we're doing with our resources, where we're getting them from, and
Good to know that, because I'm mainly worshiping at Westminster these days, but I
So-
don't know what that church is current, if there's any current.
I don't know if it was really active back and forth. Go to Genesis, it's a great congregation. You know, I mean, it's different, but we're all different, and one of the things I've been thinking is, why don't we just all walk out of church at least a couple times a year and go to a congregation, you know, be the minority somewhere else?
I have a question about Genesis. They chose not to become Presbyterian. Are they a denomination?
I think they're non-denominational, and this is what I'm seeing with a lot of multicultural churches, or if you don't get formed within a denomination, it can be, you get a whole lot of pushback from your denomination when you start to do these things. I mean, like, you know, even Piedmont, when we are in the process of talking to Promised Land, I'm sitting here going, oh, we need to get a lease signed, oh, I've got to cover for them, how do we make this palatable to the CO, you know, like, how do we do this? And I'm like, I could spend all day doing that. One of my elders like, you know what, if it's in God's hands, it's gonna happen, but let's lead with that and worry about the institutional stuff on the back end. But some of the dangers of that is that leaves the ministry vulnerable while that's happening, because there's always gonna be something that's not up to Presbyterian or Methodist or whatever snuff. And that's what happened with Genesis, is in a messy combination of their congregation, white and black, they didn't manage to stay within a denomination. And at the time we were trying to get them to join, we were in the midst of all of our discussions about sexuality and things like that. And golly, what a mess that was. I mean, congregations were playing gotcha. When I was talking to the pastor, I'm like, you know, hey, we've got a great pension plan, but I'm not sure I think this is more for us that you guys join us than it would be for you guys.
And how big a congregation is it?
I don't know.
I attended worship this spring at Genesis. There were probably 25 of us, or 30 maybe, in the room. Definitely a mix of black, white. I would say unmistakably Baptist in orientation, Baptist evangelical in orientation. So denomination notwithstanding, you know clearly where they're coming from. Yeah.
Mhm.
Where do we go from here, sir? Cameron, you gonna work on this?
So we've never done this before. My plan is, the proposal last night was more just because like God was moving something and I was gonna try to help, I wasn't sure if it was the right one. So I guess my idea is to put together that email list and say, hey, based on the conversations, this is what we see forward. We can, do doodle poll or Google polls on like, hey, is it really about giving this money back to Genesis, or is it about taking the money that we did receive and furthering the process of cross-cultural mission, or is it giving it to Warm Springs and like trying to share this wealth with a community that is similarly impacted as Genesis? So anyways, so I think we just continue, but I think it's gonna be electronically.
I was gonna say.
Thank you.